Welcome Dr. Sanjeev Bansal sir. Thank you for coming. So the treatment of diabetes has evolved from insulin axis to another axis, and that axis is the glucagon axis. You learned a lot when DPP-4 inhibitors were launched, and you learned all about incretins, and we found that they had very useful benefits in the treatment of diabetes. After the introduction of GLP-1 analogs, which are actually augmented incretins or augmented DPP-4 inhibitors. Okay? So what do DPP-4 inhibitors do? They have two actions. They go and act on the beta cells and they stimulate insulin secretion. The other thing that they do is they go and downgrade or inhibit the action of alpha cells, and therefore they decrease the levels of glucagon. Very good. What does glucagon do? Glucagon is the main hormone which causes glycogenolysis. And glycogenolysis is the main process which is responsible to keep you alive when you are not taking any meals. Okay? So, your fasting glucose is directly dependent upon a phenomenon called hepatic glucose output, in short HGO. Hepatic glucose output is determined by a hormone which is called glucagon, not insulin. Insulin is the hormone which causes glycogenesis, and glucagon is the hormone which causes glycogenolysis. Okay, so now for last about 10 years we are thinking of the glucagon axis. It's balancing the act in diabetes. It is a game changer. It is the most transformative molecule ever discovered for treatment against diabetes. You buy one, you get one free. What do you get free? Lot of patients of diabetes are obese, and it's a condition which has been termed as diabesity. People of diabetes having obesity. So if you have people of diabetes with obesity, you cannot treat obesity only by giving insulin. Why? Because insulin acts like a growth hormone. You take insulin, it will add more. It will cause lipogenesis. So you need to balance it by giving another molecule which is acting on a different axis, and that axis is the glucagon axis. Dr. Saptarishi Bhattacharya sir is going to elaborate that axis for you, the advantages of this GLP-1 analog, not only on the diabetes axis but also on the obesity axis. And please, I would require your attention to this wonderful deliberation by a wonderful endocrinologist who is going to be our speaker on 23rd of August. I have given him the invitation on your behalf, not only for him but also for his better half. And he will also sing a song for us on 23rd of August. He also happens to be a good singer. No, he is not a good singer. He will only sing us for a dedicated group. Sir, over to you on this molecule.
So this slide show will be slightly awkward because I think it has opened as a PDF, and so I think so after the hiccup and all the issues we had, so is there a full screen option? I don't think so. Anyway, so diabetes, as we know, it's common, as so is obesity. The numbers are increasing. So again, there is no need to reinforce that again and again. So the number of people with diabetes in India will be like 101 million, pre-diabetes 136 million, even though we don't apparently look obese or overweight, but we have a very high prevalence of abdominal obesity, and we need to address the obesity as well as diabetes pandemic in the Indian context. So we know that, as Dr. Chauhan was telling, that GLP-1s do offer a new way of approaching treatment. So when you might be all remembering that when we used to talk about glycemic control, what we used to see was that if the HbA1c goes down, the weight used to go up. So we were using agents like insulin, sulfonylurea, pioglitazone. Maybe metformin was the only one around 20 years back which did not cause weight gain. So earlier, glycemic control 2 decades back or 2 or 3 decades back went hand in hand with weight gain. But so even though we are able to control glucose with maybe insulin, but we were still not able to get the benefits we all thought that we'll get out of controlling diabetes with insulin or sulfonylurea pioglitazone. Because even though if the weight goes up, there are multiple negative pathophysiological effects that set in, which we all know drive several complications including cardiac, renal, liver, OSA. People will end up doing knee surgeries. In younger generation, it would land up with PCOS, obstructive sleep apnea. So everything used to be more and more prevalent, even though we were doing all the things right. We were getting the HbA1c under 7, but we were not able to achieve the optimum outcome. So this new form of therapy, so they offered went. So people do come to us and tell, so this is a new molecule, इससे क्या होगा? अभी तो 1 साल 2 साल से है. So if you look back to the look back into the history of GLP-1, so it got launched way back in 2006. So that was exenatide was the first one which actually was launched in 2006, and then after that we used liraglutide, then we used dulaglutide, and now we have started using tirzepatide and semaglutide. Semaglutide in India first came as a oral tablet, then subsequently the injectable was launched, and since it has been in the market so for almost 10 years, so that is the international treaty. India follows that if any product is there in the market for 10 years, so India, so there are still some countries we still cannot manufacture generics, but Indian understanding with the international market is so that after 10 years of launching the molecule, India can start manufacturing generics. So we have generic form of semaglutide also right now. So as Dr. Chauhan was telling, so we know that incretins are, so we never thought that, everybody thought that insulin is going to determine how diabetes is getting managed, but that paradigm has changed. So we now know that incretins are the ones, at least in the current decade, so this has been the most revolutionizing molecule where they not only have help us achieve glycemic control, weight control, reducing cardiovascular disease, reducing kidney disease, reducing liver disease, reducing OSA. So the combination of glycemic control and weight loss with multiple other pleiotropic benefits. So that is something which was, if you had been thinking about, say, okay, 20-30 years back, okay, this is how we are going to treat diabetes in future, nobody would have known. Maybe it will still change in another 10-15 years. We know where science will take us, but at this point of time, so I used to counsel my patients, if somebody comes with diabetes for the first time, okay, you have been diagnosed with diabetes, the natural history of diabetes is that okay, we start with metformin today, after 1-2 years it will be metformin plus DPP, maybe then a SGLT2, then a sulfonylurea, and after 10, 15, 20 years, the natural history of diabetes is that of progression and you will end up with insulin. So that was the classical teaching that has been always there. But if you now, that you can't tell that anymore. So we have people who have been diagnosed with diabetes who have been started on agents like semaglutide and their diabetes do not progress for years. So we have people who have been on multiple OHAs and they have been on semaglutide or tirzepatide and they are actually off maybe 3-4 OHAs have been taken off just because they have been able to bring down their weight. They are using this, so their fatty liver has gone down, their inflammation has gone down, the grade 3 fatty liver, grade 2 fatty liver, and universal finding in many of the ultrasounds that we don't see anymore. The HSCRP goes down. So there are multiple ways these molecules have actually changed how we have been treating diabetes, and it's time that at least if somebody, so there are again different phenotypes of diabetes, but again it's time that we think of using these molecules very early in course of diabetes or even in pre-diabetes so that we can modify the natural history of progression of diabetes. So this is all we know, that GLP-1s, they are like very ubiquitously present, so they are present in the brain, present in the heart, present in the pancreas, even present in at least in rodents in C cells of medullary or C cells of thyroid. So they get secreted as soon as food enters our intestine from the L cells, and they cause two phenomena. So one is related to hormone secretion, one is insulin release, which is glucose dependent. So GLP-1s will ensure that insulin is not released when glucose is not there, so it's glucose dependent insulin secretion, unlike that of sulfonylurea. So they will not cause hypoglycemia, that is a major advantage. And also on the other hand, as Dr. Chauhan was telling, they also suppress the glucagon secretion, which causes hepatic glucose production. So one of the, sometimes we do come, where patients come and tell, okay, डॉक्टर साहब मेरा फास्टिंग बढ़ा रहता है बट पीपी उसके बाद कम हो जाता है. So again it depends on the balance of your insulin secretion and glucagon secretion. So if you have a excess glucagonergic drive, so that causes overnight glucagon products, or that causes glucagon secretion and causes overnight hepatic glucose production, and that causes the blood glucose to go up, unless you have taken a beer the last night or a sweet last night, which is also another very common cause of having an elevated fasting plasma glucose. So GLP-1 RAs, so as I have told, we started with exenatide, and there are GLP-1 based therapies, there have been exendin based therapies. Now we have moved on to semaglutide, and we are moving to dual and triple agonist also. And semaglutide is a potent molecule, it's a very strong molecule, and even very low doses can bring about most of the effects. So this is a structure which we all know, bound to albumin. So most of the products launched, research by Novo Nordisk, they have this albumin structure as a binding agent, so that increases the half-life of the molecule. And there are also this C18 fatty diacid chain that is again unique to Novo products, which are there, so has been there in liraglutide also, so and even is there in semaglutide. So the major metabolic actions we already discussed. So it will cause suppression of appetite, cause glucagon suppression, cause glucose dependent insulin secretion, as well as delay gastric emptying. So these are the primary mechanisms of action, and there are additional pleiotropic benefits also, and we have all discussed it that there was a sustained trial which injectable semaglutide, so HbA1c reduction in the range of 1.5 to 2%. So we used to get HbA1c. So if you look into the DPP-4 trials or SGLT2 trials, the average HbA1c reduction used to be around 0.6, 0.7, 0.8% maybe with say canagliflozin 300 mg. That is the maximum we used to have. So this molecules got HbA1c reduction in the range of 1.5 to 2%, and we also achieved that with sulfonylurea with insulin, but at the cost of having quite a lot of extra hypoglycemia. So this is unique. It's bringing down the HbA1c to almost by 2%, sometimes 2.2, 2.5%, but without causing hypoglycemia. So that is something which is quite phenomenal, and this in several sustained trials, that was the trial where semaglutide was used for in diabetes. Also we have so there almost 1.8% HbA1c reduction compared to most of the agents. So again, people do come back and tell that, Acha, this doctor told me that insulin is the safest. I don't want to go on to tablets because they are going to damage my kidney. ये तो GLP-1 का तो कोई मतलब ही नहीं है, क्योंकि मैंने नेट पे देखा इसमें ये खराब होता है, वो खराब होता है, मसल लॉस होता है, पेनक्रियाटाइटिस होता है. But again, you have to understand this is a molecule which has shown one of the strongest data for kidney protection, for hepatic protection, for cardiovascular protection, for so the benefits you get in terms of organ related benefits, it's none of the insulin trials. So even Glargine, if you remember, was tried in a cardiovascular outcome trial. It didn't show any benefit. So insulin, you can't quote a single trial where insulin has shown that okay, this is going to cause severe benefit, this is going to cause renal benefit, this is going to cause hepatic benefit. You don't have a single trial, but you have a molecule which causes glucose lowering in the range of 1.8 to 2%, no hypoglycemia associated with weight loss, multiple pleiotropic benefits, and also organ protection. So if somebody, so now if somebody is really hesitant that okay, I am on 3-4 OHAs, and earlier you used to tell ideally it should be semaglutide, it should be started much earlier, but sometimes people do have inhibition to injection, even cost was an issue. So earlier you used to tell okay, आपका ये 4 दवा चल रहा है, अगर नहीं होगा तो अगले बार इंसुलिन के लिए सोचेंगे. So now that version has changed. So now it's like आपका ये 4 दवा चल रहा है, अगर नहीं हो रहा है, I have been trying to give you semaglutide, you have been refusing it. We need to start semaglutide on your next visit, because even if the HbA1c is 9%, the average HbA1c reduction is like 2%. So you will be able to bring it down to 7%. So again, that is quite amazing, and that is not like a presumption. This is backed by hardcore evidence from RCTs, from real world studies, and we have semaglutide compared against multiple agents. Body weight goes down, CRP goes down, lipid profile gets better, no hypoglycemia, so and CV protection, renal protection. So that even we have the oral semaglutide pioneer trials which have shown similar results. We have also the state trials where semaglutide have been used for obesity management. Again, so this is one of the only molecule till now which has been used for obesity and has shown severe benefit in people with pre-existing cardiovascular disease or multiple risk factor for CV disease. And if you give this molecule, so only molecule which has consistently shown that there is going to be severe benefit in these people is semaglutide. So if somebody is having obesity and had a prior say PTCA or a CABG or had a prior AMI, so all these patients by default become candidates of semaglutide, but just because of the virtue of the fact that it has proven documented evidence where the CV risk has actually gone down. So clinical trial summary related to obesity, which comes from STEP, almost 15-16% weight loss. So you're starting with 100 kg, so over 9 months or 1 year, the weight will come down to almost 85 kg. Discontinuation rate is like 6 to 8%. So that is what I usually tend to keep on reinforcing that maybe 1 out of 12 or 1 out of 15 will not be able to continue because of GI side effects, which remain the only consistent side effects we see in clinical practice. Obviously, there are reports like pancreatitis and NION and worsening of diabetic retinopathy, which keeps on coming in the literature, even medullary thyroid carcinoma. But again, the numbers are really less, and so and the benefits they come with. So so if you weigh the risk benefit ratio, so that is how we practice our medicine. So obviously, it's a chemical; it can have some disadvantage, but again, if you look into the benefits they're offering versus the risk they're associated with, the benefit risk ratio, so it doesn't stand anywhere. The benefits are again tremendous. So this is something what we need to look into in our clinical practice. CV evidence we have been already telling, so there are multiple benefits, and interestingly, so many people might be thinking, okay, it's because of the weight loss we are having the CV benefits, but even before the weight loss is achieved, the CV benefit curve, the between the placebo and the trial and the drug actually keeps on actually separate. So there are mechanisms which are beyond the usual ways of glycemic control or weight reduction, which can drive CV benefits in this molecule. So there are direct effects, indirect effects, and abdominal obesity comes down, HSCRP comes down, blood pressure comes down, triglyceride comes down, visceral adiposity comes down. So multiple advantages of this molecule. But one of the challenges which have been there has been the cost of this molecule. So as of now, we have, and even there are real world evidence where it has shown that it sometimes, if you look into CV outcome data related to, so tirzepatide does quite well in terms of H1C reduction and obesity weight reduction percentage. But if you look into the CV benefit area, so somehow semaglutide scores better. So people don't have an answer for that. So whether the GIP has a negative impact on the cardiac outcomes, or it was just because of the trial design that tirzepatide was compared to a molecule which was already having, which was known to have CV benefits. So that is why the trial didn't show benefit. But again, if you look into the even the real world data, so not the most convincing of evidence, but still both SCORE and STEER, they do quite well, and actually in the STEER data, semaglutide versus tirzepatide, the benefits with semaglutide was actually more than that of tirzepatide. So people, so there is one school of thought that actually you should be, if there is a CV, underlying CV disease, so you should be using semaglutide more often than tirzepatide. So there is heart failure data also coming up, that is also quite encouraging. And there is CKD trial. So we had one of the patients who was in, one of the doctors who is in Cleveland, and she had recently come and we were discussing. So for them, there are patients who were on maintenance hemodialysis, they were getting semaglutide. The transplant recipients, they were getting semaglutide. So CKD is not a contraindication at all, provided in India sometimes many of the patients who are undergoing CKD, they might be under-dialyzed, so they have a lot of GI issues and all those things. So sometimes that can be deterrent that we have not been able to use it so routinely. But so if you look into US, where the dialysis facilities are excellent and people do use peritoneal dialysis, even home dialysis in many situations, there, since the obesity burden is so much, so many patients are actually undergoing dialysis on semaglutide, have undergone transplant on semaglutide. So, and if you look into the diabetes aspect, so if you are stuck with diabetic nephropathy, the person has continuing proteinuria in spite of the currently available evidence of using say ARB full dose, you are using a SGLT2 inhibitor, you are using also finerenone. In spite of that, if you are not able to control the CKD progression and the albuminuria still persisting, you can actually think of starting this molecule, because this is the fourth pillar in the management of CKD and diabetic nephropathy, where it has shown benefit. So these are the current indications for semaglutide, and so it's indicated for type 2 diabetes, it is indicated for obesity. 30 is the cutoff in people without comorbidities, 27 is the cutoff with comorbidities, and in case of MASH you can actually use it. So if you have a patient who has got a FibroScan and it's more than 8, the LSM score is more than 8. Alchem people, I think you need to, Nick, people from Alchem, you need to slow down slightly at the back. There's a lot of noise. So if there is, so if you have a patient who has, so you have the provision of getting a FibroScan done very often right now. So there are companies who have started giving, providing FibroScan. So if you have an LSM score of more than 8, so that becomes an indication for starting semaglutide, irrespective of diabetes status, irrespective of obesity. So this is an indication which is approved by the FDA. So we keep on getting the FibroScan, we see scores of 12, 13, 14, and we usually advise saroglitazar, which might be a good molecule, but still we do not have the data where it has consistently shown benefit. So almost everybody with a fatty liver or an SGLT, SGOT, elevation is on saroglitazar. It might show benefit in future, but let's have that data that is actually showing benefit. So there are only 2 molecules which are approved and actually known to cause reverse fibrosis in the current, as far as if you go by current evidence for managing MASH. So that one is resmetirom, the other is injectable semaglutide. So there are no other approved molecule by FDA. Saroglitazar might come up with an approval, but still we are waiting the fibrosis reversal data from saroglitazar. Even though it gives us a happy feeling that okay, fatty liver was grade 3, it has come down to grade 1, SGOT, SGPT was 120 and 130, it has come down to 40, 50. But if you look into hardcore evidence of histological reversal, you don't have a published data where it has shown that benefit. So this is one area which we often miss out, but you should be using semaglutide because that is a resmetirom as of now is not officially available in India. So if you're looking into MASH reversal, this is the only molecule which is available. So dosing guidelines, so you always go slow, start with 0.25, then go up to 0.5 after 4 weeks, then 1. For diabetes, you can go up to 2. For obesity, you can go up to 1.7 or 2.4. So if somebody is having diabetes and obesity is also there, so you need not restrict to 1 or 2. You can go up to 2.4 if you want to bring down the weight. So obviously you get the added advantage of weight loss also with that. Also there are practical considerations. Gastrointestinal effects are the only one which actually can cause hindrance in terms of tolerance, continuity. Now the cost is not an issue, it's affordable for most of our patients. So, but we do struggle with the GI issues. So 20-30% is the usual GI side effects. The rate of discontinuation is 5, 8 or 10%, and it can be anything. Mostly what we tend to see, again not backed by very strong trial data, is sometimes the upper GI side effects tend to be more with semaglutide, maybe the lower GI is more with tirzepatide. But again, if you look into the head-to-head trials of semaglutide by tirzepatide, you will get almost similar numbers. Acute pancreatitis, so the rates are same in placebo arm and the trial arm in most RCTs, so in all RCTs. So there is no increased evidence of acute pancreatitis. Diabetes and obesity by itself are conditions which predispose to acute pancreatitis. So even though you might see a newspaper article where they have told that this many people have pancreatitis because of usage of semaglutide or tirzepatide, but if you look into similar population who have not use semaglutide and tirzepatide, they will be actually also having similar number of pancreatitis. Obviously, if somebody has past history of pancreatitis or has risk factors, you would need to be very, very careful. That is a relative contraindication, not an absolute contraindication. If somebody develops pancreatitis while using semaglutide, you can't restart it anymore. That becomes an absolute contraindication. Retinopathy has been reported in only one trial, and trial is underway to see whether there is an association or not. But again, as a precaution, you need to screen the retina annually for diabetes. So that is what you should be doing. And ideally, safer to screen for, at least if the person is having diabetes. For obesity, you don't need to screen for retinopathy, as there is no recommendation like that. But for diabetes, as a part of the routine annual checkup, you should be screening for retinopathy. If somebody is having PDR, the mechanism of worsening is because of acute improvement in glycemic control that can happen with insulin also, known in pregnancy also. So, but again, the person maybe can undergo the necessary treatment for retinopathy in terms of laser or whatever PGF or other factors that are recommended, and then start this. So elderly, it's not an issue. Renal impairment, it's not an issue. Actually, it's protective. Hepatic impairment, again, we do not have recommendations for F4 level of fibrosis, but where cirrhosis is actually there. Small studies are there, but again, F2, F3, it's actually the recommendation to prevent fibrosis and rather reverse fibrosis. Pediatric population, India recently the government approved usage above 12 years of age, so you can use in adolescents. In US, the approval was there almost 3-4 years back, and even the Indian government has also approved. State teens has been published, so you can use in adolescents also wherever indicated. Nausea remains the main challenge. Clinical recommendation, mostly gastrointestinal issues are the ones which can be challenging, and most guidelines have stated that even diabetes, obesity, and you have CVD, renal disease, liver disease, even it does not have a direct evidence on OSA, but you can extrapolate that people can, with OSA will benefit, people with osteoarthritis will benefit, women with PCOS, they will also benefit because of the weight loss. Very high up in the hierarchy of treatment of diabetes management, AG 2000 takes 26, reinforces the same. And even we have heart failure trials also, that also reconfirm the same. So summarize, so it's a unique molecule, now affordable to most of our patients. CV benefits are there, renal benefits are there, MASH, proven fibrosis reversal, weight loss, CRP comes down, inflammation comes down, glucose lowering excellent, no hypoglycemia. Weight gain will be a rule rather than an exception, and approved over a broad variety of patients. Thank you for your patient listening. I will hand it over back to Dr. Shiva.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saptrishi. Despite all the hiccups, we've been able to finish the talk by 10:22, and we have time for discussion, 15 to 20 minutes. And I would like to go to our pediatrician friend today, although we have many pediatricians in the group, but Dr. Sangeeta is a special invited today, and I would like to ask her, is she aware of this revolution called the GLP-1 analogs? Dr. Amrish Mittal sir has written a book called The Weight Loss Revolution, and I have given all of you a personally signed copy by Dr. Amrish Mittal to all of you. आपको भी दे देंगे sir, आपको भी दे देंगे. Dr. Sangeeta, do you have a question on GLP-1 analogs to Dr. Saptrishi? Big hand for Dr. Sangeeta Subudhi and Mr. Shiv. उनके लिए भी बता दो. Your question.
Very nice talk, sir.
Thank you.
But as a pediatrician, well, I've not used it, obviously. But sir, many people are asking for it, especially now that now I'm seeing, before weddings they're going on semaglutide, and it's basically the parents who ask us, can our child get it? And this pubertal surge of weight that we are seeing.
So if you are considering the pivotal time, so obviously that is the time they undergo a lot of transformation, the insulin resistance that comes up, and so you have children who are like maybe so lifestyle has a strong contribution. There will be genetic factors also. So you will see that maybe both their parents have diabetes and the child is weighing 70 kgs, 80 kgs. It's not uncommon. You'll see their name. They have all acanthosis and everything. So everything is there. So whatever is classically defined, which suggests insulin resistance and which will predispose to them to diabetes in next 10, 15, 20 years, it's all there. So if you want to reverse it, this is the only way to do it. So if you look into type 2 diabetes management, so I remember a situation, so I was I passed in AIMS of 2010 and I was was invited to chair a session in 2012-13 in AIMS, and there was a talk on child type 2 diabetes in adolescents, and I asked the speaker as a chairperson, so DPP-4 inhibitors was quite commonly in use, and should we be using DPP-4 inhibitors in adolescents? And everybody in AIMS was looking at me very skeptically, so how can you ask about giving DPP-4 inhibitors in adolescents? But if you look into the ADA guidelines right now, they say that if you have a type 2 diabetes in adolescents, and so in all these cases, obesity will be the predominant driving factor. There is no confusion. If somebody is not having obesity and diabetes in adolescence, it's not type 2 diabetes, it's type 1 or a slowly evolving form of type 1 or some other genetic forms of diabetes, maybe MODY. So if somebody is having adolescence and type 2 diabetes, so its obesity is the prime driver, so you need to treat the cause. So if you are not starting GLP-1, so maybe the child takes GLP-1, changes his life. They have a lot of food craving, so their main problem lies with food craving. So you tell this child that it's like an addiction. आप बच्चे को बोल दो कि फोन मत देखो, कहीं ना कहीं बहाना ढूंढ के वो देखेगा. So it's the same for food also. अब बोलो कि मत खाओ, वो कहीं ना कहीं बहाना ढूंढ के वो खाना खा ही लेगा. And it's ultimately the calorie which actually goes up. If you want to prevent that, so this is the one which will actually suppress the surge. So I think this is the way to go about it. So we have to accept the reality there is a problem and we need to treat it.
Are you satisfied? All right, great ma'am.
There was another question, sir.
Yeah, please.
So should once you have started the GLP-1, you will have to continue it forever, sir?
No, I think we don't have.
I mean, it comes back. So how much it
So
comes
again, so that is a grey area and a $1 million question. And again, people have been using semaglutide and tirzepatide. So we have been using for 1 to 3 years, and people have been using in US and Europe for 10 years of semaglutide, almost 5-6 years of tirzepatide. So obviously there will be, if you look into studies where they have discontinued and what has been the trajectory of weight gain back, so maybe 25% will be maintaining their weight without the medication. There will be around 25% who will gain back the weight in next 1 year totally. There will be 50% who will be intermediate, who will gain back some amount of weight. If you look into the absolute trial data, so you will see that average weight gain back after discontinuing tirzepatide after 1 year is like 10%, with semaglutide it's like 7-8%. But again, so there is again individual variation. So in our practice, we have people who have stopped and who have maintained their weight. So obviously this has to be individualized. So if it's type 2 diabetes, it's a lifelong disease, and you are looking at most probably continuing it even for glycemic management. If it's obesity, that's a gray area. But if you go by international guidelines, if you go into any international forum, so people will equate obesity with type 2 diabetes or dyslipidemia or hypertension, and it's a chronic disease which requires long-term treatment. So most probably, if you are treating, there is no harm. If the person wants to get out of it, you can discuss, you can down titrate, don't stop abruptly, and see whether there is a weight rebound or not. don't go slow about it. But if somebody says that I am happy to continue it, please don't discontinue it.
Right.
If somebody wants to discontinue, you can discuss the options, try various ways, and whatever suits best you need to individually.
Great answer. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask you, your patients on type 1 diabetes who are on insulin, do they ever ask you how long to continue insulin? Yes, मैं पकड़ गई ना. So there is the answer. And Dr. Sapneshi has said only a single question from every table, and he says in September take a CME from me. And only one question from every table. And Dr. Bansal sir, I am coming to you. मैं सर एक सवाल और भी है और एक सिर्फ सवाल एक तो है. तो डॉक्टर साजिद परवेज जो हमारे बैचमेट हैं 1979 से, उनके पास एक सवाल.
Sir, it's regarding. Good evening, sir. Oh, wonderful. Sir, it is not regarding patient is non-diabetic usually, and when obesity is the major challenge, and there is comorbidities like cardiac illnesses or hepatic involvement, fatty liver progressing to fibrosis. So weight loss is the major thing that we have to hit. What do we do? Is the evidence regarding selecting of tirzepatide versus semaglutide? Where should we go if weight loss is our main challenge at that point of time?
So again, so that is a question, and I think the evidence is, the best answer is the evidence is evolving. So semaglutide is an older molecule, so it has published evidence that it has CV benefit both in diabetes and in people with obesity with pre-existing cardiovascular disease. So that is proven. So the trial with tirzepatide, they took dulaglutide as the competitor for the CV outcome. So the problem with that was that dulaglutide is already a molecule which has proven CV benefit. So in that it did not show CV benefit compared to dulaglutide. So the trial of tirzepatide versus placebo for CV outcome is underway. So once we have that published, it will definitely show CV benefit. So whatever the regulatory authorities need for CV related approval by FDA, it will get that. And it's presumed because of the strong weight loss, it will be there. But again, tirzepatide came later than semaglutide. The Essence trial part 1 has been published, part 2 is still underway. So tirzepatide trial is, and for MASH is underway. We don't have the results, so most probably if the results come out, we can start using it. But again, there is a grey area which some people point out, is that whether this extra agonism has some negative impact or not, so it's still not very clear. So GLP-1 receptors are there on the cardiac myocytes, so it has like if you create an artificial situation of myocardial injury, so GLP-1 agonism actually protects against ischemia. So GLP-1 receptors are not there, so whether they have, so the trial with real world data which showed that semaglutide did actually better in terms of real world outcome. It's not a comparative trial of CV outcome, so you can't actually be totally sure, but semaglutide did better in terms of CV outcome compared to tirzepatide in real world data. So whether that is related to GIP effect, we do not know.
Short answer, is semaglutide cardiovascular safe?
Semaglutide is cardiovascular protective, more than safe. It's beneficial if you are not using it, so you are
Protective.
You are denying the patient of an advantage.
Good, very good. Dr. Jitendra Saxena.
So my question is, should semaglutide be used in diabetic patient irrespective of obesity status? Number one. Number two, what do you think is the role of semaglutide, oral and injectable, after SOUL and FLOW trial with regards to renal benefits? And number three, sir, I just attended a CME on reversal of fibrosis with ceroglitazar. We are also talking about the same with this molecule. And the result with the ceroglitazar is going to come out in December itself. So I think there would be a molecule again like semaglutide, which would be challenging, and like it's orally also taken, even semaglutide is taken orally, which could be challenging the so far the benefit that we are seeing in hepatosol of semaglutide. So semaglutide could be a potential challenger to semaglutide in times to come.
I will take all the questions. So what was the first question?
So first question, irrespective of obesity status, very simple.
So you type 2 diabetes.
डॉक्टर सप्तऋषि
Yeah.
वो 3 इडियट्स का ना सर एक गाना याद है, क्वेश्चन ही क्वेश्चन है, सॉल्यूशन कुछ पता नहीं, सॉल्यूशन जो पता चला तो क्वेश्चन क्या था पता नहीं। सर क्वेश्चन बता दिए सर, आप सवाल सॉल्यूशन बताइए।
इस रानी सिंड्रोम में बोल सकते।
So इसमें so you can use at any level of weight for type 2 diabetes. It's indicated.
Irrespective of
Irrespective of obesity, so that BMI cutoffs are for use in obesity. So if you want that if somebody's BMI is 23 or 24, so and you want to use semaglutide for glucose control, you can use that. It's an
जस्ट अ राइटर, जस्ट अ मिनट सर, देखिए बीच में ना पूछिए, मुझे मालूम है सर आप बहुत अच्छे सवाल पूछने वाले हैं। The BMI criteria does not apply to semaglutide 1 milligram. The BMI criteria according to DCGI does not apply to Ozempic, the standard Ozempic 1 milligram. But if you are talking about Wegovy, I'm sorry, Tiwari, please, we have to mention that. If you are talking about the 1.7 and 2.4 milligram, you have to talk about the BMI criteria. So if it is only for diabetes, which is semaglutide 1 milligram, there is no BMI criteria. You can, it's only diabetes. It's only diabetes.
So, but again, the FDA has changed that criteria of use of semaglutide diabetes from 1 mg to 2 mg. So now the 2 mg criteria is also approved for use of diabetes irrespective of the weight or BMI. If you want to go up to 2.4, as of now by the label it doesn't have an approval. But even till 2 you can use for diabetes control.
So my second
Sir, the second question was about the FLOW trial and the benefits of semaglutide in kidney patient, diabetic kidney disease.
Also SOUL trial, there's the SOUL trial and the FLOW trial with respect to oral semaglutide and injectable semaglutide.
Are they same or they?
The FLOW trial was with injectable semaglutide. It was not a oral semaglutide trial. The SOUL trial was a oral semaglutide trial in terms of CV outcome. So it clearly showed benefit, was stopped prematurely, no confusion. FLOW trial, injectable semaglutide, strong kidney production, again prematurely stopped. So clearly showed benefit.
Do you remember any trial done with incretins which was stopped prematurely because of the great benefits? The DAPA-HF. The DAPA-HF. Okay, great question.
Question sir, both ceroglitazar and the semaglutide.
So we'll be quite happy if saroglitazar, an Indian molecule, gets an FDA approval. So they have actually submitted their. So I was talking to Glenmark. So the national team and all that.
Landmark or Zydus?
Sorry, Zydus. So I was talking to Zydus for this, and they said that they have submitted the approval and they have actually biopsy-proven data. That is quite encouraging, and they are expecting that they will get an approval also. But let that get published also, and let us get the approval.
क्या बात, तारीफ करूं क्या उसकी जिसने तुझे बनाया। Dr. Ashish.
Thank you, sir, for another nice presentation. So the question always comes up with regards to how long the people should be on the medication. Both it comes up in the clinic and it comes up in the academic setting even today. So previously we have not had any much evidence, right, about how to go about it. But recently you had the presentation of surmounting which was the different molecule. But what they, in that trial, basically was 1 year on the, up to the maximum tolerated dose. Then they went down to the first therapeutic dose and then the other dosages. I think you can elaborate, but it basically showed that they do maintain on a particular dose. So does that help us to answer this question?
I think that is a very important point. So the person who is keen on maintaining their weight, so practically they will find their own way. But again, so it varies. So people do like micro dosing, they maintain on a lower dose. People have actually even done alternate week dosing. So again, there is no perfect answer, but you may need to do something. So most certainly, if you stop everything, it's proven that there is going to be a rebound, because that is how your body has been genetically programmed. So that is your metabolic standpoint. You always tend to go back. Sometimes there's one few small data where they have shown that if you continue for 3, 4, 5 years, the chance of the weight getting sustained may be more. But again, so it's a grey area. We don't have the perfect answer. So, but again, it has to be a shared decision between you and the patient, and whatever is able to maintain the person's weight in the target region should be the way to do it.
Just one more small note. So we were talking about.
And even we have trials where orforglipron has been able to maintain the dose of after tirzepatide.
One more small note on the pediatrics. So we have the STEP teens, which gave us the approval by DCGA for the pediatric population. There was once also STEP kids, which is even younger population. And so while that was not given for approval, I think that also adds to the safety and sort of the tolerability of that in those kids.
Thanks for those great questions, Akash. Dr. H.L. Kentru was sleeping away. So I just got in time.
Patient type 2 diabetes, obese, on insulin, is there some role of this GLP-1 receptor?
100%. So you need to start and counsel the person, take off the DPP-4 inhibitor if the person was already on it. That is the only one molecule you need to take off. Other is a question of titration. You gradually build up the dose of semaglutide. It's expected that his insulin requirement will come down, the glycemic control will get better. So it has to, blood glucose has to be monitored, and it's recommended that you should be using agents which are complementary to insulin. Insulin is good, but the higher the dose, more is the weight gain, more is the fluctuation, more is the lipohypertrophy. If you are able to give a lower dose of insulin and maintain the glucose, sometimes people do get out of insulin totally if they are using semaglutide or tirzepatide.
Dr. R.K. Luth.
One comment, one question. Comment is regarding the obesity decline because of the inhibition of hedonic aging. If a patient has taken for 2 or 3 years, his psychology does change, his binge eating habits go down. So one suggestion was tapering down the dose and maintaining it. Other suggestion is whether oral semaglutide can be substituted beyond the injection, so that the weight loss is maintained. The question that I am asking is regarding the triple action. There is a dual action tirzepatide. GLP, GIP. There is one more in the offering. It's a triple action. Can you give some light on that, sir?
So again, so that is a triple action which is most near approval is retatrutide. That is a GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. Triple action agonist. So glucagon we have been. GLP-1 we all thought was a friend. GIP-1 we all thought was a neutral person. Glucagon we have been all thinking has been an enemy, but it's a triple agonist, and the combination actually has shown almost 25 to 26% weight loss, even beyond that of tirzepatide. So only seen with bariatric surgery before this. So again, we have trials published in NEJM and should be getting approved in next 2-3 years, maybe 1-2 years.
Dr. Pawan Chaudhary, who is a spine surgeon, MCH neurosurgery, he always advises his patients to lose weight before he attempts their surgery for backache. He has a question.
Sir, I want to just highlight the role of semaglutide in neurosciences. There have been some ongoing studies which they prove the role of semaglutide in the benign intracranial hypertension. So it reduces the intracranial pressure. So could you please highlight?
So in fact, there are actually adolescents also who land up with in emergencies with raised intracranial pressure. So that is not an uncommon condition. I recently came across two, three patients who had raised ICT because of obesity. So raised ICT is linked to obesity, that is known. But we don't have that much of trial that where it has shown to reverse. But anything which reverses the weight will also have benefits in terms of the manifestations we get related to obesity. So that is something. So if some person with obesity, it can be any age group, presents with severe headache, always think of raised ICT and refer to doctor.
Right, Dr. Tulsi sir.
Thank you. Dr. So just
One question I have.
no sir. Everyone's asked 4 questions. I'll ask only 3. So let me begin by saying that was a wonderful talk, Dr. Saptarshi, and as usual. So Gastroenterology, a prestigious journal, just 2 days back talked about say 29% of the patients, obese patients, may have a selected subphenotype who have increased gastric emptying, low GLP-1 levels. These people would probably benefit more with the anti-obesity drugs like GLP-1 or tirzepatide. So these patients will respond more. Your observations on that? The recent article published.
Again, I think so. These are variations. So we know there are super responders. There are the responders who are as per trials, and there are maybe 5-10% of malab. This is only 5% of patients actually do not respond at all. So that way. So they are
Yes, this response in those people were almost double.
So again, so there are various. So this is one hypothesis which has very recently come up. Thank you for bringing it up for in everybody.
Welcome, sir. So my second question would be regarding an FDA warning on increased heart rate with such like drugs, heart rate by about 3 to 4 beats per minute, and they word of caution in patients who have tachyarrhythmias, especially patients who have atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, SVT, etc. So why would that occur? Why would the increased heart rate occur with these drugs? Tell us, sir.
So again, it's very difficult to answer why.
I'll answer that.
Retatrutide is the one where there was
What did you say?
So the retatrutide phase 2, that was seen in the retatrutide phase 2 data, with arrhythmias and tachyarrhythmias.
Yeah, you're right to an extent, but why would they occur? Yeah, Dr. Saptarshi, let me answer that question. So we know that our heart has a sympathetic as well as a parasympathetic tone, and they said that probably due to autonomic nervous system modulation, where sympathetic overactivity is more patients when you give GLP-1 drug as compared, and also the vagal, more vagal stimulation occurs here. So sympathetic versus parasympathetic drive here is probably the answer. Not only that, it also may, the dehydration may contribute to increase or hypolimic, may increase as a compensatory mechanism the heart rate. So this was as far as the heart rate was concerned. My last.
Just an add-on to it, so there was 2-3 published literature on people who are already on hypothyroidism, so their dose requirement actually goes down. So they go into a state of slightly subclinical thyrotoxicosis, and if you are not looking into the dose carefully, and they have also reported to increase AF and tachyarrhythmia, so that is something why they also need to be careful.
So no. Let me proceed further and ask you regarding the SURPASS COT and the SUMMIT trials, which clearly said 38% reduction in cardiovascular benefits as compared to your semaglutide here. So let the data, let the FDA approve this. This was a landmark, the SURPASS COT and the SUMMIT trials. 38% reduction in COT, never seen before, not with semaglutide. My last question would be regarding
the FDA, it said that it's approved for children above the age of 12 years or overweight. This was the FDA approval, but the ADA said you could give it to children above 10 years. Thank you, sir.
So the children 10 years is for tirzepatide, because that is so for diabetes. So tirzepatide does not have an adolescent approval for obesity. For type 2 diabetes, tirzepatide has an approval. For obesity, semaglutide has an approval. Tirzepatide.
Sir, after his exhaustive questions, last comment only. So, semaglutide, tirzepatide, they are going in the same direction. So, at places one is better than the other. So, one point was noted that CV benefit was better with sema versus tirzepatide. As you said, maybe GIP is not there on the cardiac tissue. And similar benefit was also with the hair loss. Hair loss was less with the semaglutide versus tirzepatide. Is it also GIP related or it is weight related?
So again, the hair loss you are telling.
Yeah.
So hair loss is, alopecia is like 4-5% in both, but again, so that is whether there is a different mechanism or it's only protein restriction. So we still don't know. So we don't have a straight answer for the hair loss part. But regarding Dr. Tulsi's comment on the CV benefit, so the trial which had gone into most disrepute, which was ACCORD trial because of intensive glycemic control. So it was one of the trials which had the lowest CV rates in both the trial arm as well as the non-intermal, as the control arm. So if you look into, even though because the trial got discontinued because of increased risk of CV mortality, the CV events with intensive glycemic control was very, very low. So that is something again, tirzepatide, even though it did not reach the statistics, but we do hope that once we have the published, they compare it with the putative placebo and hypothesize that it should be beneficial, but that would not stand the scrutiny of FDA. The FDA will require hard data, so once we have that, so we'll get that. They will get that.
हमको मालूम